Yes, sir. What's happening, YouTube? Afro Cuban here, and I'm back with another episode of what my DC movie universe would be like. Now, as you may know, this is the series I've created where I hypothetically reboot and rewrite the DC movie universe and break down in order which movies I will put out and explain the details and the plot of each of those movies. All right, let's get to it. So, we're jumping straight back into another Superman story. Now we're going to get the one and only Death of Superman movie. Now, I know technically in my universe, this is only Superman's sequel, so it may seem like I'm killing him off quick. But I purposely did it like this for a reason. Because when you think about it, we've already had three straight movies back to back with Superman in it, so his character development is pretty much solidified. We've had Justice League, then we had the Batman Superman World's Finest, and now we're going straight into the death of Superman. So, with these three, plus the solo film that he had, that's four movies to develop his arc. So, in all actuality, his death doesn't feel rushed at all. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so when we start the movie, we see Clark and Lois. They're building their chemistry. They're driving home from a brunch date. They're not technically dating yet, but there is a spark between them. Clark clearly has feelings for her, and she also finds Clark's shyness to be cute, and they flirt from time to time, but she's mostly infatuated with Superman. So basically, she's torn between the two, obviously not knowing that they're the same person. So after brunch, Clark drives her home and drops her off. And as Clark is leaving her driveway, they both get an emergency Amber Alert on their phones. Some kind of chemical plant explosion in downtown Metropolis. Now it's their day off, but Lois, being the super journalist that she is, she requests to be picked up by a helicopter so she can rush over to the scene and cover the story. And Clark, being the superhero that he is, he suits up and flies downtown to help. Now, this is where we will get a cool, iconic scene of Clark ripping open his shirt to reveal his S symbol. And so, because of his super speed, obviously Clark gets there first. And he's doing his thing. He's using his super strength to burrow underground to reach the main power lines so he can cut the power to the plant. Lois arrives shortly after in a chopper, and she's doing her news reporter thing. But then one of the power line wires breaks off because of the vibration from Superman burrowing in the ground, and the wire hits the helicopter and sends it flying out of control. As they spin out of control, Lois falls out the chopper right before the chopper is about to crash into a building. But then Superman catches Lois in midair and then flies up and also catches the helicopter. So Superman and Lois, they smile and stare in each other's eyes, and then he asks her if she's okay while he's carrying her in one hand and the helicopter in the other. And then he places them back on the ground gently and flies off. Superman saves the day again. So now we cut to the next scene, and this is where Martian Manhunter finally reveals himself. Clark is headed home to his apartment, and when he gets there, he sees a man in a trench coat standing in front of his apartment door. Superman uses his super hearing and he hears the man's heartbeat, but it's not beating like a normal human's. In fact, it's not beating at all. It's humming and vibrating. So Clark asks the stranger, "What are you?" The man starts to shapeshift. He's a tall green Martian. He gives Clark his backstory and explains where he comes from and what made him come to Earth. Apparently, his homeworld, Mars, was raided and destroyed by Darkseid's first in command, his trusted general, Granny Goodness, and her female Furies. So the Martian came to Earth to prevent it from suffering the same fate, because there is a mother box hidden somewhere on the planet. All of this is just filler and sets up future movies. So, getting back to the issue at hand, Clark and the Martian get to know each other and they build a friendship because Clark can relate to the Martian's struggles of being a survivor of a dead race. The Martian also tells Clark to call him Jean. The two talk for a while, and they talk about life on Earth. Superman gives a heartfelt monologue about how Earth is a beautiful place to live and how all of the humans are rash and naive, but at the same time they're worth saving because everyone has the ability to do good and be better. And so now we get to the second act. We cut to a group of astronauts in outer space. They have found a large object frozen in space with weird symbols on it. These symbols are Kryptonian scriptures, but the astronauts, they don't know this. And they're bringing this object back to Earth so it can be studied by the government. But while they're heading back to Earth, they notice that it starts to thaw and crack open. And out comes an ancient Kryptonian mutant. It's huge and it's wearing some kind of full bodysuit with Kryptonian letters going around it. The mutant roars and begins killing everyone on board, causing the rocket to crash land in the ocean. Now, the civilians on Earth, they see this happen and they believe it's a meteor, so they stand around taking pictures. And out emerges Doomsday. He slowly rises out of the water. A mindless, soulless rage monster whose only focus and mission is to end all signs of life. Now, quick backstory. Doomsday is a genetic creature created by the Kryptonian government to be a weapon against other planets. They would send Doomsday to other worlds to eradicate all life, giving the Kryptonians the freedom to then come in and steal any resources that they can find on the planet with no resistance and no witnesses or evidence that they were ever even there. Doomsday is then cryogenically frozen until the Kryptonians can find a reason to unleash him again. But when Krypton exploded, Doomsday's cryopod remained intact and he just floated across the stars for decades until he was recently found and discovered by the team of astronauts that he just killed. Okay, so getting back to current events. So Doomsday emerges and begins killing and destroying everything in sight. The army soon intervenes and they're throwing everything they can at him. They're shooting him with tanks and attack choppers. The missiles and explosions don't do anything except rip open his bodysuit, finally revealing his mutated face and body. He has glowing blood red eyes with horns and sharp bones protruding from his head, arms, and fists. He's smashing through the tanks and ripping soldiers apart. He's even using the bone claws on his knuckles to stab and impale civilians. It's a gruesome scene, and the army is forced to retreat. And so, eventually, Superman finally flies in to try and slow him down. But Doomsday is just as strong, and he gets even stronger and adapts after every attack. Superman and Doomsday exchange blows, and each blow is so strong it creates a shockwave that causes the planet to shake. All of this is taking place only a few days after the Batman and Amazo fight. So Superman is still not fully recovered, and now Doomsday is starting to win. Superman is still putting up a decent fight, but he's showing fatigue. He's breathing hard, and his vision is blurry. So, this allows Doomsday to land a devastating punch to Superman's ribcage. So now Superman is on his knees, coughing up blood, and he passes out. Luckily, Doomsday is programmed to kill anything that moves and puts up resistance, so he doesn't waste any energy on an unconscious Superman. He instead turns around and continues his rampage on the fleeing civilians. Also, at this point, the yellow sun is starting to fuel and mutate Doomsday even more. His horns and bones grow longer and sharper, and he releases a massive heat vision blast that shoots out from his eyes and his mouth at the same time. And so now, this is where Martian Manhunter finally intervenes with his Martian abilities. First, he flies in and tries to get the civilians to safety. And then his arms turn into large tentacles, and he tries to restrain and subdue Doomsday, but it doesn't work. Doomsday breaks free and storms towards him. So Manhunter turns transparent and shoots a laser beam from his eyes. But then Doomsday just fires back with his own heat vision, which is stronger, and it knocks Manhunter back. The fight continues for a while, and now Manhunter must try one last tactic. He tries to mentally lobotomize Doomsday by entering his mind and frying his brain cells. This is an ability that even Manhunter doesn't like to use, but right now it's his only option. And so Manhunter turns transparent again and he enters Doomsday's mind. But there's not much on his subconscious except rage and destruction. So eventually the plan starts to work. Doomsday is roaring in pain and beginning to slow down. He drops to one knee and then attempts to fire a heat vision blast at Manhunter. But because Manhunter has turned transparent, the blast just phases right through him. But unfortunately, it hits a car directly behind Manhunter and explodes. Martian Manhunter's only vulnerability is fire. So the explosion weakens and disorientates him, giving Doomsday enough time to super speed over to him and stab him through the chest with the claws on his knuckles. And so finally, we get to the third act. Superman wakes up in a nearby army facility. The doctors and the scientists could not help him or see what was wrong because of his invulnerable skin. So they just had to wait it out and pray he wakes up. So when he opens his eyes, he sees the army general standing over his bed, who just so happens to be Lois's father, General Lane. And then behind him was Lois Lane, a couple of soldiers, and a bunch of frightened civilians. Superman then slowly climbs out of bed, and they all cheer when he stands to his feet. Superman then explains to the general that during their fight, he got a look at the symbols on the creature's clothing. It was Kryptonian, and the words read, Weapon and Doomsday. So Superman warns the general that the creature is Kryptonian, and if the Kryptonians called it a Doomsday weapon, that means he is a destroyer of planets. I don't think I'm strong enough to stop him, Superman says. And then Lois asks Superman why he doesn't call in backup from his super friends. And he replies that if the creature is Kryptonian, then it's not much they can do to help. They'd just be putting themselves in harm's way. And so finally, General Lane speaks up and he says that they have a weapon, a last resort Hail Mary in case Superman ever turned evil. A red solar energy nuclear missile. Now, Superman is pissed that they would hide or even build something like this behind his back, but he doesn't have time to argue or question it. So he agrees to try and force Doomsday to a secluded island where they can fire the missile. And right before Superman flies off, Lois grabs his hand and pulls him to the side. She pleads with him not to go along with the plan because it's a possible suicide. Superman just stares in her eyes and smiles. Lois starts to cry. Superman says, I have something to tell you, in case I don't make it back. She puts her finger over his lips and she says, I already know. I've known for a while, Smallville. Smallville is a nickname she gave to Clark, so she's basically implying that she knew his secret identity the whole time. They share a long, passionate kiss, and then Superman flies off. And so, shortly after, Superman finally returns to the battle. He sees Martian Manhunter. He's gushing blood from his stab wound, but still trying to fight off Doomsday. So Superman swoops down and tackles Doomsday through a building. Superman is smart, and he figures that since Doomsday is Kryptonian, they must share similar powers, and maybe Doomsday hasn't learned to focus or control all of them. So Superman claps his hands together to create a sonic wave loud enough to damage Doomsday's eardrums. The pain will be 10 times worse if he hasn't learned to control his super hearing. The plan works. Doomsday covers his ears and screams in agony, and Superman quickly grabs him and flies away, carrying him to an uninhibited island so that the general can fire the missile. But as I stated before, Doomsday can adapt. So his ears, they begin to mutate and they seal closed to stop his eardrums from ringing. And then Doomsday does the same attack back to Superman. He breaks free of his grip and he does a sonic clap that disorientates Superman long enough to drop Doomsday, and they both fall in a nearby desert. General Lane loses his patience. He sees on a satellite feed that they've landed in a secluded desert and he orders the missile launch. And so now the fight is reaching its climax. Superman and Doomsday are pretty much killing each other. They're throwing their strongest punches. And as the fight continues, Superman uses his super hearing and he hears a local Arabic family camping only a few miles away. They'll be caught in the blast radius if the missile makes impact. So Superman must think fast. He does the same ground burrow move that he did when he saved the chemical plant. He burrows under the sand, and Doomsday is using his heat vision to blast the sand to try and pinpoint and hit Superman while he's underground. And finally, Superman comes back up from behind him and grabs Doomsday and flies him straight up into the upper atmosphere. He plans on carrying Doomsday up in the sky so the missile can detonate and explode in the air where there will be no casualties. And Superman's sacrifice is successful. The missile hits them both while they're in the sky and detonates. All you see is a giant flaming red mushroom cloud in the sky. And then out comes two projectiles falling back to Earth. They hit and leave giant craters in the ground. Doomsday is dead. Majority of his upper body was blown off. Superman used Doomsday as a shield, so Doomsday took majority of the blast. But the red solar explosion was still able to do significant damage and take away 90% of Superman's powers. So the damage from the explosion weakened him, and then that long fall back to Earth is what finished it off. And so, a few hours later, when Lois arrives on a chopper, she runs over to Superman's body. He's not fully dead yet, but he's slowly fading. When she gets there, he doesn't say a word. He just smiles and touches Lois's face. But then his arm drops, lifeless. His eyes, they slowly close. And Superman, he drifts off and dies. Lois just sits there holding his lifeless body as she cries and lets out a heartbreaking scream. We then fade to black and the movie ends on that somber note. No words, no music, just a black screen and the sounds of Lois crying.